It is just a few minutes before we'll start class, and we will have a few people coming to the class at this time. But what I would like to do is talk a little bit about the practical. Hi, Nicole. That we have coming up. Hi, Nicole. So what you're going to do tonight, we'll be working with these worksheets. So go ahead and number on action from 1 to 8 on the left, and then start with 9 through 17 on the right, and we'll go over them is what we'll do. Okay, and I know it's a few minutes early, but I did overkill last night, and I think I had people like looking cross-eyed, Jamie. So I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version, and we'll keep it simple. We'll do the KISS principle. You know how to KISS? Huh? Mm-hmm. Jamie, with your what? Orbicularis what? Oris. Orbicularis oris. Yes, that's correct. So I even have some models, and I know it's still early, but I'm going to definitely keep it like elementary is what we'll do, okay? So we'll try and make it so it's a little easier. Hi, Trinity. Okay, so what I ask is take sheet number 1 on the left, number from 1 to 8, on the right 9 through 17, and we'll go over those muscles is what we'll actually be doing in about 4 minutes. Okay, and any questions that you may have, this is a good time to ask. Nicole, I like how you put effort in to get that 100.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. So I noticed on the last quiz last time, you really gave it a good effort, didn't you?
I tried.
Yeah, you did good, or did well. All right. So I also made a little bit of a change. We can still do any of the, if you want to update any of those quizzes for improving your grade, do it through Friday. And then you have up until like next week in order to get the last lab in, which is this lab, to improve that grade. But I opened up the second practical, or test 2, instead of it just being on Monday and on Tuesday, it's open all day Sunday. So it'll be open all day Sunday, all day Monday. It'll close Tuesday night at 11:30. Okay, it'll be 60 minutes with 5 minutes reprieve, 50 questions, multiple choice. And did anybody see that I have an Anatomy 2 lab that's face-to-face Wednesday nights? That'll be on the Gibbs campus. So Anatomy 2 lab, it'll actually be on the campus from, it says 7 to 9:40. I get there at 6:30 at night, and then we'll be done with all the work by 9. So typically I'll stay after 9, but we should have all our work done by 9 o'clock. And if I'm there by 6:30, you just come into class whenever, you can get there a little earlier, and you have models, and it's a little easier way of looking at things. Okay. So we got 2 minutes until we get started, but in the meantime, so we will be talking about these muscles, and this is a forearm. This is a deltoid muscle. It looks triangular, looks just like a deltoid. That's why it's called deltoid. This one in the front is the biceps. It has 2 heads. So what do we need to know? I don't think I told the students last night, but we need to know the shape of the muscle so you can identify it. And then you need to know, well, how does the muscle, what's its action? Remember, the action is when the muscle shortens. So when this muscle shortens, it flexes and supinates the forearm. It's called the biceps. And if I pop it off, underneath, the muscle underneath is called brachialis. And it gets its name because this whole region of the shoulder is the brachial region. Therefore, this is called brachialis. The one in the back is the triceps, and it's an extensor for the forearm and the arm, and allows you to bring your arm into extension. Okay, so it's not yet time. We have another minute. So what we want to do is make sure everybody, we're going to have a bunch coming in now. Just make sure you have that sheet number 1, page 1, so that we'll be able to go and work on those. You will number the actions from 1 to 8 and the origin insertions from 9 through 17, just so that we can give you a number, and then it makes it a little easier. There has to be at least a question or two. Are there any questions? And if you're with us today, I'd like to see a face. So Jamie and Jennifer, if you want to let me see your face, if you're not too embarrassed to do that, show us a nice face. And I know some of you are, but I'm going to try and do a lot of talking, but I think there's going to be some questions. So please, ask them. All right, it's 7 o'clock. So let's go ahead and take a look at this first sheet. On the wall behind me, what I did is I put up a muscle picture, and the first muscle on the sheet is called latissimus dorsi. And it's a muscle that's lateral and it's on the back of the body. So it's dorsal. And so that's how it got its name, latissimus dorsi. So the origin is 17, the insertion is 16, the action is 4. So in other words, the lat allows me to adduct my arm and extend, is what it does. The next muscle is this large muscle that's up in my chest. It's called pectoralis minor. It's in my pectoral region. So the origin is 11 and 12, and its insertion is out on number 16. And the pec muscle allows me to adduct and flex my arm, is what it actually does. So it's number 5. Okay. So those are 2 thus far. We have another one called the deltoid. And on the model of the arm, here's the arm. We're looking at a deltoid muscle. It has a V shape, or it is a deltoid shape. That's where it got its name. And so if you look at it, if I put this muscle on top, what do we actually have here? Well, we have several things. We have up in this area, right in through here, we have the spine of the scapula and the acromion. So the origin is 11 and 10 for the deltoid, and the insertion is going to be the deltoid tuberosity, which is down here. And so if these 2 points come together, I bring my arm up like that, and that's called AB duct. Okay, ABDUCT, that's number 6. So far we've talked about latissimus dorsi, pectoralis major, and the deltoid muscle. What they want you to do next is to take a look at what's called the biceps brachii. And the reason it's called biceps is that it has 2 heads. And so that's where the bi comes from. And so the biceps, the origin is 13, the insertion is 15, and the biceps, the action is 1. So it flexes my arm and it will supinate my arm. So it'll flex it, but it also supinates it. And if you remember, we were talking about the pivot. Remember the radial head in the capitulum where it pivots? So if my arm is prone, it allows me to, one head attaches there and it allows me to supinate. So that's what that one does. The next one on the posterior part of the arm is triceps. Triceps number 13 for origin. And the insertion is what? Olecranon process, which is number 14. And the action is 2. It allows me to extend my arm and my forearm, is what it'll do. And if we go back to the front, this is my biceps brachii. If this were to tear, there's a muscle right underneath it here called brachialis. Brachialis is a flexor, and all I want you to know is number 3, that it flexes the forearm. So it would allow me to just bring my forearm up like that. And again, so it's called brachialis, and this is called biceps brachii or brachialis. Here's our triceps in the back and the deltoid that's on top. All right, as a group, they want you to look at hand extensors. So on the back of the hand, the muscles of the forearm, they will do the action of number 8. So if you put your arm like this, put your hand on the back, and you feel it tighten, I've extended my wrist. And if I go on the other side and I put my hand here, now I've flexed my wrist. So I have wrist flexors for flexion and wrist extensors for extension. So let's see if we have anybody else coming in. Okay, let me go ahead and see if we can get the rest of everybody. We'll let everybody else come in. Okay, we're starting to get everybody else into the class. Well, you now have 9 people, so that's good. So I just went over in the first 5 minutes this sheet, and this sheet basically is copied. A copy of the sheet is in the bottom of the lab, and it'll give you the origin, insertion, and action for those that are with me now. And you can check there, and it has all this information. But for those that were with me from the beginning, this is the forearm. This deltoid muscle basically allows me to abduct my shoulder, is what it does. In the posterior part, because the muscles are on the back, remember the action is when the muscle shortens, I extend my forearm and my arm. The muscles on the front of your forearm here, this one here is called the biceps. It functions to basically flex, but it allows me to supinate my forearm. And so this muscle is the biceps. I told the people that were with me a little bit earlier that you need to be able to identify the muscle and give me its name, and then give me where it's attaching. So for instance, when you look at that first sheet that we were just looking at, it says latissimus dorsi. It would want you to know that the origin is from T7 to L5, and the insertion is into the tubercle of the humerus, and that latissimus is an adductor and extender is what it is. So I'm going to set this down. What I want to do is take a break for a minute and jump to page 5 of your notes. On page 5 of your notes, it wants you to look at what's called a single twitch. Let's take a look at a single twitch. So in other words, we want to know, well, what happens for me to get a twitch in a muscle? There's 3 parts of it, and this is taken directly from your notes. And the notes basically say several things. It says skeletal muscle physiology. It says latent period, contraction, and relaxation period. So when you look at this, this looks like a little what? Looks like a little curve. The latent period is everything that occurs until you actually form the bridge of actin and myosin. And then when that bridge starts to slide over each other, this is called the sliding filament theory. I'm now contracting the muscle, so the muscle shortens. On this little graph, force is going up in the vertical and time is along the horizontal, okay? So we have a latent period, we have a contraction period, and then we have a relaxation period. So at the bottom, it wants you to put these various parts of this into each, let's say each area. So the latent period, let's go ahead and do what we did for page 1. I had you number from 1 to 5 on the left, and on the right where it says calcium returns to SR, sarcoplasmic reticulum, number 6 through 10. So what has to happen in what's called the latent period? If you read it from the notes, let's do that first so it makes sense. Response of the muscle to a single threshold stimuli, where acetylcholine binds to the sarcolemma. So remember, the neurotransmitter has to get to the muscle. And then calcium leaves the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and it says that initiates coupling and starts just the contraction. So the latent period is this period where you don't really see any change. It's flat. So what actually happens there? If we use these numbers, several things happen. Number 4, acetylcholine binds the sarcolemma. That's the first thing. And then number 9, it says the impulse travels across the T tubule. Remember the T tubule? Okay. Across the T tubule. And then number 1, calcium is released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And then number 3, it says actin filament is unblocked. So before we can start to get contraction, actin has to be unblocked so that the myosin can attach and we can start to ratchet. So that's where the muscle starts to slide across to each other. So that's in the latent period. The contraction period, 2 things are going to happen. Number 2, cross bridges are active. So when the cross bridges are active, we're actually sliding these 2 filaments across each other. So the muscle does what? It actually shortens, does it not? So that's number 2. And then number 10, it's called a power stroke. So when the muscle fibers contract, they are doing what's called a power stroke, and the muscle will shorten, okay? So when I lift something up, here tonight, we're going to have the Tampa Bay Rays playing in what? They're going to be playing baseball. So I have this neat little card holder with a baseball and a bat. So when I lift this, I have to shorten muscles in order to lift this object, okay? So in other words, I have to create a force to lift this up. All right, so that's the contraction period. What happens in the relaxation period? The relaxation period is where number 6 occurs. Calcium will leave, okay, from actin and return to the sarcoplasmic reticulum. That's number 6. Then number 7 says cross bridges detach. And number 8, the actin filament is reblocked. So when we're looking in here at our little, what they call a myogram, I have a latent period, I have power and force occurring, and then a relaxation when the actin and myosin release, and now I'm back where I was before. Well, they want you to explain different physiological changes that happen if you're going to do several things. So what I have now is my interpretation. There's the single twitch, remember, latent contraction and relaxation. But now what am I going to do? I'm going to have a latent period. I'm going to start to get a contraction. But before the muscle relaxes, I'm going to stimulate it again and create more force, and I get another little bump. So this is called wave summation, Justin. So I have not allowed the muscle to relax. So while it contracts, I hit it again with another action potential, and I create more force. And so the waves, there's more force. That's why it's called wave summation. So if I add 1 and 1, I'm summing, am I not? So that's where that term comes in. Well, I can get to a point where I can get several wave summations and get to a point where I have a sustained contraction, but the contraction is not creating more or less force, it's just holding. So what is that like? It'd be like me taking my coffee cup and just holding it out here. So I'm not raising the cup, I'm not lowering it, so I'm not creating more force or less, I'm just holding it. So that's called tetany, T-E-T-A-N-Y. So in tetany, the muscle is contracting and just holding. And then on this neat, I stayed up all night last night making this diagram for you guys. You don't believe me, Justin, do you? Okay, but anyway, what happens when I get to this point? I fatigue. And in order for a muscle to fatigue, I need what? I need to use up the, let's say the glucose, the nutrients, and there's not as much oxygen available, and I have lactic acid. So what occurs in that is that I deplete these and I fatigue is what will occur. So they ask you questions, do they not, on page 6? Do you have a page 6 of your notes? Okay, so what I did is I drew all these different parts of like single twitch. Single twitch is just the one twitch. Wave summation is where I have like a contraction and then have a second contraction. Tetany is where the muscles are maintaining their force but not becoming more or less. And then fatigue. It says if I increase the frequency of stimulation, what effect will occur with muscle force? Well, if force is along this vertical line and time is this way, if I increase the stimulation, force increases. So it goes up. So I increase frequency, I increase the force. And then it wants me to define wave summation. Wave summation just says that I am producing a stronger contraction because I'm stimulating again. I'm causing more stimulation and I get more force. That's what's called wave summation. It says define tetany. Tetany is a sustained contraction. So on the graph, it's what? It's horizontal, is what's actually going on. It says fused contraction. I'm maintaining the force of the muscle is what I'm doing. And then fatigue is the muscle is no longer able to sustain a contraction, so it will fatigue out. And so describe the condition that allows fatigue. Nutrients are depleted, oxygen is reduced, and buildup of lactic acid, which causes us to be what? Sore. All right, so let's go to the second page, which is the one that has a lot of muscles. And I'm going to go and grab the muscle off the table, so I'll be right back with you. One sec. All right, so we are now on page 2. Page 2 looks like this, and we're going to talk about all these muscles. And I think last night I gave them so much information, their eyes were cross-eyed after we got done in like 70 minutes. But tonight we're going to keep it simple, keep it basic. All right. The first muscle on your sheet, well, before we do that, what do I want you to do? Again, under action, number 1 extends knee. But you see, wherever you see the word knee, right leg. So in other words, it'll say extends knee, that's just put leg there, because it'll make it understandable. And then from 1 to 10 is the action. Over on the origin insertion, start with number 11, and you should go all the way to 20. Is what you're going to do. So we could give you a moment just to take care of that. So I stopped today at the school and picked up a model that should help us. So what I actually have here is a thigh and a leg and part of a pelvis. And so this first muscle is called ilio, I-L-I-O. And it gets its name because it's inside this bone called the ilium. And if you look inside, that's one part of the muscle. And the other part of the muscle is called the psoas. The psoas is this big muscle that attaches up onto the lumbar spine. This is deep inside your belly, in basically behind the intestines. And so the ilium psoas, its origin is 17. 17 is the ilium. That's the first part of the muscle. It attaches, or its action, you don't have to know the insertion. Its action is number 8. It flexes the thigh. So if I have something from here and it goes down to my hip, to my greater trochanter, and I shorten it, I flex my thigh. So that's ilium psoas. That's the first one. The next one is the part that just fell off the back. And that's this one here. Everybody is sitting on their gluteus maximus. Okay. Brianna, you're doing it. We're all doing it. Justin, Trinity, we're all sitting on our gluteus max. And so if we look at it, the gluteus maximus origin, 17 and 20. Insertion is 15. And the action is 10. So this big muscle is an extensor of my thigh. So in other words, remember this part of the femur, we consider that my thigh. So if this contracts, my thigh will extend backwards. The next three muscles, rectus femoris, it gets its name because this is the femur. So when I look at it, and they have tape on it, so it's not all going to fall apart, it's the middle muscle. It's called rectus femoris. It crosses two joints, and that is important for us to know, and I'll tell you why. It crosses, well, first of all, rectus femoris, origin, 17. Insertion. So in other words, we're going from the ilium. Does anybody remember this point down on the tibia? It was called the tibial, there's a point there. Does anyone remember that? What was that called? Anybody?
Tuberosity.
Tuberosity. So all these muscles of the quads are going to go into the tibial what? Tuberosity. Okay. So rectus femoris, insertion, 11. Vastus lateralis, insertion, 11. Vastus medialis, insertion, 11. Tibial tuberosity. Okay, well, how do I know what do I have? So here's my big toe on this side. This is the inside. So this muscle above the knee is called vastus lateralis. The one in the middle was rectus femoris. What's this one on the inside? Vastus medialis. So what do these do? Let's look at rectus femoris. It crosses it comes from the ilium, crosses the hip, crosses the knee into the leg. So if I contract this and I contract that, what I do is number 1 and number 2 for action. I flex my thigh and I extend my leg because it crosses two joints. It has two actions. I flex my thigh and I extend my leg. Vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, it's going to extend the knee, which is 1, and extend the knee as well, number 1. And a lot of us consider that its action is also, well, anyway, extending the knee is what it actually does. So when you see knee, think of leg. So whenever you see the word knee in there, just write leg, because this is the leg, this is the thigh. This is a hard concept to get a hold of, but the quad muscles are in front of your thigh. What happens to them if somebody gets a big bruise on their quad? Has anyone ever had a quad bruise? You can't do what with your thigh? You can't flex it, okay? And so those are part of the quadriceps. Not that you need to know it, but if I pop this rectus femoris out, there's a vastus medialis, lateralis, behind it is intermedius. So there's the 4. So that's what gives you quadriceps. This muscle broke off, and it crosses from up here on the ilium, and it goes down to the inside of the tibia, and it crosses the leg, and it allows me to flex and externally rotate my leg in order to sew. And that's right, I said sew, as in sewing a sail. So sartorius is this muscle that starts up here, goes into the inside. It allows me to flex and externally rotate or cross my leg and flex my thigh. It's number 9. The story behind sartorius, back in the 1600s, 1500s, when sailing ships were used as transportation, somebody had to sit and sew the sail. They used this muscle in order to flex and externally rotate their leg and their thigh. And they named this after the sailor or the person that was the person making the sail. And that's where it got its name, sartorius. Okay, so cross leg, when you think about crossing, it's on an angle. So that's called sartorius. Okay, catch your breath. Any questions thus far? Brianna, are you totally confused? I told you there'd be a lot of muscles tonight, didn't I? Okay, so now let's talk about the different compartments of your thigh. You've got a front compartment in the front. We just talked about it. You have a lateral compartment on the outside. If I have lateral, what would the inside be? A medial compartment. And then in the posterior, I got a posterior compartment. So some of these muscles are kind of like on the edge of two of these compartments, and they may have more than one function. They may do more than one action. But if you generally know that the muscles that are in the front of your thigh are flexors to your thigh and extenders to your leg, then you have an understanding of what they do. Okay? All right, so now what are we going to do? We're going to talk about those on the inside of the thigh. The first one is called gracilis, and its action is number 7. It will adduct and flex your, so it adducts and flexes the thigh is what it says. The next muscle, if I pop this one, the one with the tape on it, that's gracilis. If I pop this out, there's a huge big muscle called adductor magnus. Its action is 7, adducts the thigh, flexes thigh. And then the next one, there's an adductor longus. It's a longer muscle in here, and it does the same thing, 7. So it would allow somebody to take their leg and bring it towards the midline, okay? So gracilis, adductor magnus is long and big, magnus, okay? Like if you ever watch the world's strongest man competition, there's always a magnus, a big guy, a huge big fellow. All right, the longest will be a long, thinner muscle. All right, so we've got those muscles. We've done the adductors. We've done the flexors. Now we need to get to the what? To the posterior part. And so in this area, another muscle fell off. So let me attach him. This big muscle, again, was gluteus maximus. So if you're looking at the back of someone's, let's say, thigh, you have gluteus maximus, which is an extender. But we want to talk about biceps femoris. It's lateral, but the origin is 13 and 15. And you don't need to know the insertion, but it does action number 3. And action number 3 is flexes knee, extends thigh. So biceps femoris, action is 3. Semitendinosus, okay. On the medial side of the posterior part of the thigh is a skinny muscle on the medial side. It's long and thin. They call it semitendinosus, the tendon. Tendons are thin. I think of tendons as being thin. And if I take it up, there's a real thick muscle called semimembranosus. So these two are on the medial aspect. So semitendinosus, origin 13. Semimembranosus, origin 13. Action 3 for both of them. It flexes the leg, extends the thigh. So because it's on the posterior part, it will extend this part of my thigh, bringing it backwards. But if you look here, when we have 180 degrees, if this moves up and the angle becomes less, that's flexion of the leg. Does everybody understand? So if I move this part, I've extended my thigh. And if I move this in the angle, instead of being like 180 degrees, now is at 90, I'm flexing my leg, is what I'm actually doing. So when we look at the hamstrings, it has 2 functions. It will extend the thigh and flex the leg. So if I have somebody like so, and they take the heel of their foot and they bring it up, that's flexion of my leg. Does everybody kind of get that idea? All right. Let's go ahead to this other area right here. If I take gluteus maximus off, there's a lot of little muscles underneath there, but let's put gluteus maximus back on. So the gluteus maximus is going to run from the sacrum out to the trochanter, but there's this muscle on an angle, and it's kind of back, but it's on the side. It's called gluteus medius. See where it says gluteus medius? It's kind of more on the side. So remember, we had a posterior part of the thigh. I had an adductor, the inside. I had a front compartment. Now we're going to talk about the lateral. So this is the side where the femur is with the trochanter. Remember the trochanter, where everything attaches to that trochanter. And so when we're looking at that, gluteus medius is connecting right in here. It's connecting on an angle, and it will abduct your thigh number 6 is what it does. On the side of the leg is a little tiny muscle called a tensor, T-E-N-S-O-R. And if you look on this side, there's this broad band of white fibers running from the ilium to the tibia. It's called the iliotibial band. So from the ilium to the tibia, it's this band. And so the TFL, put the letters TFL, tensor fascia lata, it's lateral and connects in the band, just like part of this gluteus medius, it's an abductor. So it allows you to bring your leg and your thigh away, is what it does. All right, well, that gets us to the last two. This is the front of my leg. This is the tibialis anterior. And so it's the last one on the bottom. You don't need to know origin insertion, but what do you need to know about this? It allows me to dorsiflex my foot. So I can take my toe and dorsiflex it by contracting this muscle, okay? What I would like everybody to do is take 1 minute, put your hand on the front of your, let's say your tibia, and contract it and see what happens to your big toe. Jennifer, do you feel it come up? So when the tibialis anterior contracts, your big toe comes up, okay? So that's how you can know that's called dorsiflexion. On the back of the leg, and there's only part of it, this is the gastroc muscle. The gastroc muscle is going to run from the origin 16. There's 2 condyles of the femur. This down below is the calcaneus, number 12. The action is plantar flex foot, and that's number 4. So gastroc does number 4, plantar flex. So if I plantar flex instead of dorsiflexion, I am putting my toes downwards. Everybody kind of follow? So if this shortens here, these two shorten, my toe goes down. That's called plantar flexion. When this in the front contracts, that's called dorsiflexion. All right. So what I think we want to go ahead and do tonight is I've set the quiz for this lab at 10. You have 10 attempts. So what you want to do is you want to go in and take a look at the photos or the images. The images will be the same of this model, and it'll point to different muscles, and it'll ask you to name them, is what it will actually do. You want to go in and look at the images. That's one thing that you want to do. Then you want to go ahead and take a shot at the, basically you want to review the, the little chart of what happens when you have a muscle twitch. But we had a couple people come in a few minutes right after class started, and I want to review page 1 real quick so everybody gets a shot and has some understanding. So for everybody that's here, on page 1 of your assignment, number from 1 to 8 for action. And on the right-hand side, origin insertions, number from 9 to 17. And we'll take a look at these muscles. For those that were with me from the beginning, this is more of a review, Jamie and Nicole and Trinity and Justin and Jennifer. So latissimus dorsi is lateral and on the dorsum of my spine. And so its origin is number 17. It inserts into number 16. Its action is number 4. Let me show you. On this model here, or this picture, the spinous process from T7 down to L5, and then it'll come up, that's its origin. It'll insert in the tubercle up in the front. So if I take an attachment from here to here, and I shorten it, it allows me from anatomical position to adduct my shoulder, adduct, ADD, and extend. Everybody kind of follow? So this muscle is famous because of Sylvester Stallone, and he did a lot of rowing exercises, or he put his arms behind himself and he did like a backward push-up where he was just pushing with his arms, and his waist got real what, Justin? It got real small, and it made his chest look larger, okay? And so, Justin, if you want to go and have a thinner waist and a larger chest, then you need to get a rowboat and do the same action as what? Latissimus dorsi. Does everybody kind of follow? All right, pectoralis major is on, put your hands on, let's say, your sternum out to your humerus, and contract that. And what did I just do to my humerus, my arm? I adducted, but if I'm in anatomical position, and I'm like this with my arms outstretched, not only am I adducting, I'm doing what? I'm also flexing. So when we look at pectoralis major, it is origin 11 and 12, and insertion is 16. So it's this big muscle in the front. What if you're not sure, but you see a muscle on the front of the chest and all the fibers are running horizontal from the sternum out to the humerus? It's got to be that muscle. What if it's the little pec minor that's underneath? It'll be on the ribs going up to the coracoid process. So that one is the little tiny one that is here on the ribs that elevates your ribs when you breathe. That's not on our list. We learned this last time, but it allows you to bring your arms up if you're boxing, is what it does. Along with the other muscle that was on the side. There was a muscle on the side that was serrated, and it was anterior, called serratus anterior. But I also have a muscle that is on the side of my arm, and it has a triangular shape. It's called the deltoid. Its origin is 10, 11, and 11. It inserts in the deltoid tuberosity, and my action is AB duct, number 6. Okay, let me go get the forearm, be right back. You guys have it so much easier than those poor guys last night, because I was trying to show these muscles, and I didn't go ahead. I kept my shirt on, guys. But what I was doing is I didn't have these models, and the models are helpful. Okay, so the biceps brachii is the muscle that will be in the forearm. It has 2 heads. That's where it's called biceps. One of them goes up to the coracoid process. The other one, it attaches down on the radial tuberosity. But what you need to know about the biceps, origin 13, insertion 15, and it does number 1. It flexes and supinates your forearm. So it flexes and supinates your forearm. In the back of your arm, up here, is your triceps. Triceps is 13. So if you think about it, 13 is the scapula, And then it's going down to the olecranon process, number 14 of the ulna, and it allows me to extend my forearm and extend my arm, and that is 2. Okay, and then if I were to take my biceps muscle off and look just behind it, which is this one here, it's called brachialis. The brachialis is a flexor of my forearm. It allows me, and that's number 3 is what it does. And then the hand, if I extend my wrist upward like so, then I'm using these muscles on the back of my arm. Those are number 8, the extensors of the wrist. Likewise, I turn the forearm over. These are your flexors of your wrist. So when my wrist comes up like this, I've used the wrist flexors, okay? The main thing that you want to do in getting ready for this test that's coming up Sunday through Monday, Tuesday night is be sure to go back and look at all the cartilages that we have and understand there's always a question on the epiphyseal plate, correct? And then know the different bones and different parts of the long bone. So you want to go back and review that and look at those labs dealing with the skull and the different parts of the skull. And then you want to go ahead and, basically look at axial skeleton. Remember, we looked at the sternum with the xiphoid process. And then what did we do the last 2 weeks? We've done the muscles of the axial part and the head. And then tonight we did extremities, upper and lower. So if you can, let's say, do review of the prior stuff and use this opportunity to improve your quiz. You know, if you haven't gotten 100 on some of those quizzes, go and take it multiple times, see what you've missed, and then get into the next one and practice because you can increase your grade. And then after that, make sure, I think the last thing you want to do is, spend some time on these muscles on this last section right in through here. Are there questions that we have? There's got to be some. I know I spent 42 minutes and I told you I'd only do 30. Sorry. Okay. I will see you. It says there's a Zoom, but we're not Zooming next week. We're just having a test. Does everybody kind of follow? So you have 2 things. You have 2 assignments. Assignment 1 is to do this Muscle 9 lab quiz, which is the pre-lab. And then the second assignment is also take the test over all the various labs since the last test. So that starts with cartilage and then bone, and then, what we looked at, axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton, and then muscles 1 and 2. This is, I think, probably one of the more difficult, only because there's a lot of memorization. But if you've kept up a little bit as we've gone, I don't think it's as hard as it would be if you've really gotten behind. Justin, Jamie, Seth, Brianna, Dania, any questions? Keisha, any questions, guys?
This isn't an honor lock, right?
No honor lock. It's just like I have an idea if you guys are honest or not, because somebody that gets a 98 or 96 and they get 60s on the quizzes, I know they didn't do something right. Yet if they're getting 90s, 100s on like all their lab tests and stuff, and they get a 90, I'm not surprised. Does everybody follow? Okay, be honest with yourself. So what you're doing now is getting ready for, getting into a health field. Let me just say it this way. If some of this stuff right now, there's a lot of memorization. Anatomy 2 is different. Anatomy 2, we start with blood, we do the heart, we do the lungs, we do digestion, we do endocrine, we do reproduction. We're kind of like put the whole body together. But if you have an interest and want to get in the health field, you want to spend time with all this stuff so you have some understanding, or else it just makes it a little hard. And if this stuff is like, no, I don't like this stuff, then maybe, going into the health field as a nurse or, working as a dental hygienist or taking x-rays or some of these other things might not be what you want to do, okay? But I'll be available. I think we've covered all the material Hopefully it's a little bit less confusing than what it would have been last night because we have a model to use. And I'll catch you next time. If you have a question for me, you want to hang out, that's fine. Otherwise, you can get a hold of me, inside the course. And I'll try and get this uploaded tomorrow sometime. I uploaded last night's version of the video, but I'll have this for these 45 minutes, so it makes it easy if you want to review the muscles and stuff like that. Okay? All right. Have a good night now. Take care.
Thank you. Good
All right,
night.
bye. Good night. Jamie, you have a question for me?
No, I don't think so. I was trying to find my leave button. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. How did you think it went tonight?
I think it went good. Some of the stuff, like, I do have a question.
Shoot.
The vastus lateralis, where does that origin from? I didn't catch that.
Okay, the origin of the vastus lateralis, let me just double check on what I have. The origin is number 15, linea aspera.
Okay.
So lateralis and medialis, it's 15.
Okay.
And then what's different is rectus femoris is higher up. So it's up on the ilium. So the ilium is way up here. So it crosses the hip. So it influences the hip and it goes down the leg. So it flexes this and extends the leg is why it has two actions. Okay. Yeah. But that's what makes it a little hard if you can't see it. So I'm looking for people to fill my Anatomy 2 class on Wednesday night in the spring. Did you notice it?
Wednesdays. I can't do Wednesdays.
Well, maybe somebody else will have an in-class. It makes it a little easier. There'll be nice boards.
Yeah, because
it's so much easier.
It's so hard.
I know it is. It's learn. Right now I'm just getting to a point where I'm able to go and upload on the YouTube and then take it and put it into our courses and stuff like that. So it's taking time for me too. So.
And I've realized through this course, like my brain, I'm a paralegal by trade.
Right.
So, like my brain is very regimented, and this is like Chinese.
It's like learning a new language, is it not? It really is. And so that's why you got to break it up. So that's why I started looking, I go, all right, I need to talk about the similarities of all the adductor muscles. I need to talk about the quad muscles. I need to talk about the lateral or the posterior. And then that way it, because I was like standing on the floor and taking moving my camera down and moving my arm and flexing my leg and bringing my
I'm probably
thigh.
gonna watch that video so I can laugh.
No, you don't need to do that. It's an hour and 10 minutes. All right, have a good weekend and study hard, and hopefully you do really well on this test.
I hope so too. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.